Moscow.
That's the Kremlin. And that's the university.
Why does the West have such a negative attitude towards you?
It's fear.
Fear of what?
Of Russia, our size, our nuclear weapons, our abilities in lots of other areas. But that's an old mindset. The West has an ultimate demand. Be like the West. Accept the rules of the West. No, I have to be the way my people expect me to be.
At the moment, the people have widely different expectations, and some no longer expect anything at all of Vladimir Putin. Siberia, a 5-hour flight from Moscow. It's minus 37 degrees. Conflicts are still solved in the traditional manner here. The closest small town is an hour away by helicopter. Vladimir Putin has taken the weekend off. No meetings, no demonstrators, no noisy demands to get off the political stage, to retire. Vladimir Putin and his friend Sergei Shoigu, whose day job is Minister of Emergencies, want to go stalking deer together. Final preparations for the hunt. The fact that his name is now associated with all things bad in Russia has hit him hard. It's personal. It's an attack on a life plan, on his past. Although in public he's gone on the attack, calling the demonstrations in Russia the most natural thing in the world, hardly anyone believes him. And the opposition definitely doesn't. As a result, the weekend hunting party is small. Only men, some friends, bodyguards. Quiet, detachment, loyalty. That's what he wants here. Vladimir Putin doesn't think he's to blame for anything, at least not on the record. Putin has a law degree.
I could have changed the constitution and tailored it to my needs. Many asked me to do that. I refused. I think there are fundamental values that the country should get used to.
Arrival at the party conference, which nominated Vladimir Putin to run for president for the 3rd time. Some will vote, the others will clap. This coronation service has been scripted down to the last detail. The outgoing president, Dmitry Medvedev, waits with his successor, who's also his predecessor, for the signal to come on stage.
Председатель правительства
Even though the announcer names Medvedev first, the shouts are for Russia and Putin. The West has been banking on a second term for Dmitry Medvedev.
If someone from the West bangs on individual politicians in Russia, that's a huge mistake. You shouldn't bank on one person. You should bank on the whole Russian people.
Nothing here is left to chance. There's the much-decorated general who only knows one candidate.
Dear friends, I ask you to support the candidature of Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin at the presidential elections for the Russian Federation.
Then the dynamic young entrepreneur with the same request. And finally the woman and mother from the people. It's also Mother's Day in Russia today.
I support the candidacy of Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin for President of Russia because we mothers with lots of children and we mothers of adoptive families are putting our hope in him.
Finally, the once and future hope of the party shows why he, not Medvedev, is the man of the hour.
If the people call out Russia and Medvedev and Putin, then that's good. But when they call out Russia, then everyone should be heard. So again, please.
Journalists are only allowed to follow the show from outside the hall as a live broadcast on screen, a kind of Russian real-time. Inside, the national television station needs all the space for the nationwide broadcast, and journalists would only get in the way. The party will confirm the candidate with exactly 100% of the votes.
Of course, our political enemies are very critical because of the freedom of the press and things like that. But they can do that. They're allowed to speak out publicly and very actively. They can demonstrate. The media work completely normally and aren't interfered with. That confirms that our society has positioned itself in such a manner that it won't go back to the past.
With the qualification that so far no other party has been allowed to announce and celebrate the announcement of its candidate live and nationwide on the state television channel. Nobody, not even the opposition, doubts that Vladimir Putin will win, even though weeks later, in March 2012, they won't recognize his official share of the vote, namely 63%. But the competition is beaten. Vladimir Putin is back in the Kremlin. It's business as usual in Moscow. Those with money and connections are in the Bolshoi Theater tonight. The Cathedral of Cultured Society is opening its doors again after a refurbishment lasting 6 years. It's the event in the social calendar. Cultural events like that aren't really his thing. He's more into ice hockey. And because he was himself never really much good at pushing the puck around, he occasionally spends hours training alone in an empty suburban hall. Distancing himself from the nouveau riche and from his predecessor is beneficial for his presidential campaign. Ice hockey is a sport with a mass following in Russia. The 2014 Winter Olympics will be held in Sochi. Vladimir Putin will be 62. As president, he could open the games by skating across the glittering ice. It would be useful to be confident on his skates. That's what he's training for, and he'll do it for hours if need be. St. Petersburg, Russia's most important city after Moscow. Vladimir Putin grew up here in the 50s and 60s. At the time, the city was still called Leningrad. He never saw his two elder brothers. They both died as children, long before he was born.
I spent most of my time outside with the other boys. They were all like me. There were no oligarchies or party functionaries. They all lived elsewhere. The girls and boys who lived around us came from working-class families. Our lives were lived in the courtyard from morning till night, sometimes late at night. Then the parents came home and called us in. In the communal flat, we had a room of 24 or 25 square meters, in which I lived with my parents. Then there was a family with 3 people, and another one with 2 people.
Hardly any other city suffered as much during World War II. For 871 days, German troops besieged St. Petersburg, preventing its inhabitants from getting new supplies. Hundreds of thousands died. Putin's father was seriously wounded as a soldier. The parents survived and dealt with the trauma mostly on their own.
I can't say we were a very emotional family. We didn't talk to each other a lot. We all lived our own lives. We did get on well, and my parents stayed together their whole lives. Nevertheless, there weren't a lot of emotional issues, or heroic deeds, or great difficulties, or tragedies. They didn't like to talk about that sort of thing.
His father was a real working man. He was always ticking Vladimir off about something. Of course, he loved his son, but he was scared of coming across as too lax. His mother was benevolence personified. She was always at pains to avoid conflicts. No quarrels, that was the main thing. His father was very different. Working class, simply.
Putin's judo club meets in the gym. He trained here as a teenager. Being able to stand up for himself and asserting himself is something that has occupied the not exactly muscular Vladimir Putin ever since childhood.
How did I get into sports? In the beginning, we were all the same. At 5, 6, 7, 8. We ran around the courtyard. When we were older, 13 or 14, things changed. We all developed differently. Some grew taller and stronger and were more healthy. They became physically superior. Simply your personality wasn't enough anymore to remain the natural leader. I needed tools in order to maintain my position in the pack. Give your best for victory and the result. Get the experience you need so you know how to act in such situations. That's important. It's character forming. Sports play an important role in that area. You have to be able to mobilize yourself to focus completely on achieving a certain goal. And that's what you learn from sports.
The White House in Moscow is the seat of the Prime Minister. Arrival for the cabinet meeting. Vladimir Putin generally only shows up when his team have taken their places. They know that. Anti-authoritarian child-rearing wasn't an educational concept in Soviet days, and things hadn't changed much in modern Russia. Teachers stand at the front and lecture. Since the time of the Tsars, there have been clearly defined roles. Teachers are teachers, pupils are pupils. But to the annoyance of his advisors, teacher Vladimir Putin isn't a fan of hire and fire. He's very loyal to those he's chosen, so even unpopular ministers stand good chances of surviving. Putin's strength lies in being able to moderate between the interests of the various power centers.
Our cabinet consists of two factions. The one faction wants the state to have more influence over the economy, with more regulation and state investments. The other faction, the more liberal wing, is in favor of traditional market models and private enterprise. This faction wants the government to create transparent rules.
Adhering to rules and being respected as an equal player, even after the collapse of the Soviet Union, that's been the aim of Vladimir Putin ever since the start of his political career. Even in 2001, when the new president spoke in the German parliament, there was a sense of disappointment that the West, after an initial euphoria for the new Russia, was banking on old recipes.
Today, decisions are made without us sometimes. We're then just asked to support them. It's often said that without Russia, it would be impossible to implement these decisions. We want to know, is that normal? Is that a real partnership? We haven't learned to trust each other yet. Despite all the sweet talking, we secretly continue to resist. Sometimes we demand loyalty to NATO. Sometimes we argue about the purpose of its expansion. We still can't agree on the problems with the missile defense system. There are lots of things like that.
Government by arbitrary appointment and alcohol level.
You're not sitting correctly. Stepashin is the first deputy. Correct that. Change seats. Sergei Vadimovich Stepashin is the first deputy.
A short while later, Stepashin became prime minister. 89 days later, Vladimir Putin replaced him.
My appointment as prime minister was pretty strange. Yeltsin invited me in and said, "You're appointed." I just asked, why? He replied, "What has to be, has to be." Later, when I'd been in office 3 months, I realized what pressures I was under. Good afternoon. I shan't sit down because I won't be occupying this chair for very long. This morning I spoke to the President. He signed my dismissal notice. He thanked me for my work and fired me. My functions will be taken over by Vladimir Putin, the Secretary of the Security Council and head of the FSB.
Even before the job was offered to me, President Yeltsin summoned me to the Kremlin. He told me that he considered me a potential prime minister and that later he would propose me for the post of Russian president. That all came rather unexpectedly, and I said I wasn't sure I was intended for this job or this destiny. He didn't try to persuade me, but just said, "We'll come back to that. Think it over." Later he did come back to it, and I agreed.
In 1999, Boris Yeltsin appointed Putin as his successor. Putin showed his gratitude. As his first decree, the new president issued a guarantee that prevented Yeltsin and his confidants from being persecuted in any way. The price for power?
Ask Putin yourself.
It's normal.
Ever since then, Putin has been traveling the huge country of Russia tirelessly. He flies through the 9 time zones to personally make sure everything is as it should be, if necessary. It's a hopeless task for one person in such a large country. He likes to stick to his own rule of not letting on if a situation is difficult. When Putin sits in front of wallpaper, he could take on the color of the paper in order to signal normalcy. He has to govern for the benefit of the country. One man, one mission. Putin only deals with all the other things when it becomes really necessary. There's no sense of crisis, and he doesn't talk about one either.
If you're friends with him and you're cooperative, if you're reliable, then he'll never disappoint you. That's a very important quality in life. And in politics, it's doubly important, especially so for a man, not being a traitor or coward and not to abandon those on your side.
What are his negative sides?
I'd tell you, if he were retired, it's hard to change his mind. He wouldn't ever forgive someone who betrayed him, lied to him, or insulted him. He doesn't forget something like that.
It was the struggles of the 90s that shaped Putin, when the state went bankrupt and a few super-rich plundered the country in a Wild West fashion.
The situation was very difficult at the time, and the oligarchs you talked about had the absolute say. But that wasn't everything. The state was so weak, and so were its institutions. When I came to Moscow, that became even clearer. That triggered resistance in me. I just wanted to create order.
Hardly in office, Putin invited the oligarchs to the Kremlin. The message was clear. They were to keep out of politics in the future.
Yes, we made demands. I demanded that everyone follow the law. I said that this ruthless exploitation of Russia had to stop. Everyone got the message.
Mikhail Khodorkovsky had his own plans. The billionaire had become one of the richest men in Russia in just a few years through dodgy deals and the best government connections. He declared war on the new president and gave financial support to the opposition. He banked on the West. He wanted to sell his oil company, Yukos, the #2 in the country, to an American oil company. He accused the Kremlin of corruption. Putin responded by accusing him of tax evasion. It was a battle about who had the power.
On the next sheet, you can see that corruption costs Russia $30 billion a year. That's 10 to 12% of the country's gross domestic product.
Let's not forget about taxes or about tax evaders. You and I have already discussed this problem. Maybe that's why there are so many applications for the position of tax auditor.
Months later, Mikhail Khodorkovsky was arrested for tax evasion and sentenced to 8 years in prison. His lawyers went all the way to the European Court of Justice.
You read the verdict. There's an item in the ruling of the European Court where it says in black and white, the European Court of Justice wasn't able to detect any political motivation in the Khodorkovsky case.
Khodorkovsky had a second trial in December 2010. 10 days before the verdict was announced, you more or less said, very unusually for a politician, that Khodorkovsky was guilty, regardless of what the outcome would be.
I meant that there was already a verdict from the previous trial, and it was final. What did I say anyway? A thief belongs in jail. Do you disagree with that?
Ever since then, the economy has been a presidential concern, as has the occasional bankruptcy, like the Proletarsky company that makes ship propellers and now can't keep afloat anymore. The employees and the managers are waiting for Vladimir Putin and for help. He helped the cement factory in the neighborhood, whose owners simply closed down the company from one day to the next because profits weren't high enough for him. Then Putin came along.
When I said I was coming, they were all jumping around like cockroaches. They took all of these people hostage with their ambition, their incompetence, and their pure greed. This is about thousands of people's lives. It's completely unacceptable. Even if the owners can't agree, this factory will be opened again. Either way, we'll do it without them. Has everyone signed the agreement? Deripaska, have you signed? I can't see your signature. Come here and sign the agreement. Give me back my pen.
Putin's world, as a matter of having the will and the ideas, has reached its limits. He's become aware of that over the past few weeks. Now he wants to become president and find a successor in the next 6 years. Someone, he says, who can represent Russia's national interest, like Vladimir Putin. But he won't make the rules on his own anymore. His opponents won't tread softly anymore. The climate has changed. The fact that he and his team, the Tigers, suffer a serious defeat against the Bears is, in view of coming battles, merely the occasion for a sarcastic comment.
Gentlemen, in light of the victory of the Bears, I invite you to a beer. The tournament is over after all.
Давай.